Thanks for being with me today. In this edition of the Running Performance Series that we're doing over the summer of 2021, this is going to be a discussion about the 2021 running shoe update. So right away, I should say that over the past nearly 40 years, all the people that I've had this wonderful opportunity to work with and to coach and to help in human performance, this has been at least one of the top 5 or 10 most popular or frequently asked questions, possibly even number one, and it is this: which running shoe is best for me? What type of running shoe should I buy? What kind of shoe do I need? And this is going to be the thesis of our discussion in today's visit. So first of all, I'm going to simplify and give you the answer right away so there's no suspense. 3 things matter the most, and those 3 things are fit, terrain, and purpose. And we'll go through and discuss each of those considerations briefly, give a few examples of most of the shoe types, and then also talk about a few other bits of information which I think you may find useful. Additionally, there are a number of articles available on running shoe selection at thelifetimeathlete.com, and you can simply go to any number of the pages and type into the search bar running shoes, and you'll get a nice selection of those articles. There are also a couple of podcast episodes, and I'll even make sure that you're aware of a few previous videos that have been done. All the information is still quite relevant, and this is an update. So without further ado, let's first think about fit. And fit is king, and it's obvious. The shoe really needs to fit your foot. And how that works is each shoe manufacturer typically has a last or a foot shape around which they design their shoes. Some will have both women's specific and men's specific. Not all do, but the last really dictates how that shoe is going to be formed or built. And we want to make sure that the shoe doesn't do anything adversely in terms of comfort to our foot. We wanted to create a very strong foot to ground interface. And so in between there lies the shoe. And so that foot to shoe and shoe to ground interface needs to be fairly well fitting for force to be transferred and for any features of the shoe to even have a chance to work. So again, each brand will have a specific shape or last, and you're going to have to try on some to find the one or ones, brands that is, that work best for you. And what's nice to know is that most brands have similar models, so you can get a feature from many different manufacturers. It's a great idea to try on your shoes in the afternoon, late afternoon, because the feet tend to swell through the day until a point in that late afternoon, and you're going to get the most accurate measure of your foot volume if you try on a shoe at that time. Also, it's valuable to think about some of the various components in your shoe, and there are probably more than I need to name, but the ones that will become very obvious are, you have the padding around the heel, and that needs to feel right for you, particularly not just with softness, but how it's cut, and so it doesn't bite into those malleoli or ankle bones that will be very sensitive if the fit's not correct. Some shoes have a heel counter, which might be semi-rigid or rigid to cup or encapsulate the heel, and all these things together help to give you a good snug heel fit, which you need. Moving forward on the shoe, the saddle should fit comfortably across the instep so that that slope or sweep upward matches your foot to the greatest extent. And then the tongue should have the adequate amount of padding that you feel you need so that you don't sense the laces biting into your foot. You'll generally want about a thumbnail's width in front of the big toe as far as length in the shoe to make sure that you have enough room for foot movement and you don't get bruised toenails. And the other thing to consider is that this toe box, both from a height or vertical perspective and a width or horizontal perspective, should be roomy enough to allow for a little wiggle so that we can naturally move the toes and allow the forefoot to splay when we load it on the ground. And so those are just some basic things with fit, and I think they're very intuitive. You generally know shoes that you like, and I would encourage you to continue to go with them until they change. Now, next up is terrain. And with terrain, we're mainly thinking of the surfaces that you're going to run on, and there are mainly two choices, at least in terms of categories for most running shoes. The first would be a road shoe, and so any shoe that's designed for the road will generally have a lighter weight upper to some extent, possibly more breathability, and the sole might not be as complete or aggressive as you'll see in some shoes, which are the trail shoes, which we'll talk about next. So that's a road shoe, and they come in all types, so you can have these very heavily built ones or some that are much lighter. We're going to cover that in a moment when we get to purpose, but a road shoe. Now, a trail shoe is simply going to be a shoe which has a bit more aggressive outsole or traction and a few protection features. They may have a rock plate or a spike plate in the forefoot to protect you from punctures. They may have some extra abrasion-resistant material in the rand or around other parts of the shoe, so you'll notice that. Sometimes even the colors will vary as far as the paint jobs that the manufacturers like to put on. So we've got fit and we've got terrain. Mainly it's road and trail. However, with your terrain, you also have some specialty shoes, and that would be, for example, a shoe that's designed to run on the track. On the track, we typically don't need much cushioning at all for sprinting. This happens to be a sprint spike, but we do need the traction, so that's what this shoe is best used for. And then we also have shoes that are made for running on grass or cross country. They can be spikes as well, but again, a very light shoe which tends to have a very thin midsole because we don't need much cushioning and some amount of traction available in the shoe. Next up, when we think about purpose, the purpose of our shoes, you can categorize that in many ways, but the way that I would like to go over today is, first of all, as a daily trainer, an occasional trainer, or a racer. So a daily training shoe is simply one that's built with a bit more durability so that the shoe will stand up to that frequent use, and also any features that the shoe is offering, you'll be able to take most advantage of that. So that's typically a daily trainer. Now, a shoe that's kind of in between a daily trainer and a racer might be for someone who trains occasionally or who wants a slightly lighter, more flexible shoe, generally speaking. And so those types of shoes are readily available, and you tend to know what you like in the feel of your shoe. Finally, you have a racing shoe, and for racing, we're really looking for what's, as opposed to the daily trainer, most durable. We're now looking for what is most responsive and lightweight. And so this, again, is an example of a shoe that's primarily designed for racing. Now, the topic that comes up so often these days is basically maximalist versus minimalist. And so we might say to ourselves, well, first of all, let's define those. A true maximalist shoe is going to be the ones that you recognize to have the really thick midsoles. And so I don't really have one here today in my demo. And by the way, if you're listening to this, you can always watch the video on YouTube to see some examples. But the maximal shoes are the thicker ones, and they typically have a bit more cushioning, possibly support, and durability in most cases, whereas the minimalist shoes are going to have thinner midsoles. They may feature what's known as a zero drop in terms of height change from heel to forefoot, or that differential. They may also be extremely flexible and pliable, which allows for a bit more natural foot motion. Here's my quick suggestion. I like to use the term more, or the word more, and say this. If you typically run more miles, you run more mileage. You run more often, your frequency is higher. You run more on surfaces that are hard. I usually don't recommend running on concrete at all, but if you do run on asphalt, as in roads, or rocky trails. And then lastly, if you strike the ground hard, you just typically have a gait pattern or a strike, which is a very hard hit, or you have a very relatively high body weight. Any of those things, if you say I have more of that, you probably want more shoe to go along with it, so you may want to consider a maximalist shoe. However, if you tend to run not as often or frequent or long, and you're relatively light and efficient, and you like to run on softer surfaces like dirt paths and grass and tracks, then you may be more inclined to try a minimal shoe for that purpose. And there's a place for every type of shoe. There's some benefits and pros and cons in my opinion, but that would be a great drive for your choosing or purchasing. Next up is perhaps the most controversial topic currently, and that's neutral versus stability shoes. So a neutral shoe would be one which does not have any motion control features in it, and it's very flexible. The only thing it usually offers is some degree of cushioning. It allows the foot to function a bit more as it will, which we might say is naturally. And then a stability shoe will usually have some things designed into the shoe to make it firmer, to attempt to control motion in the foot. Some of the more aggressive stability shoes are even called motion control shoes. The research tends to show currently that stability shoes may not prevent injury more so than other types of shoes in most runners, and they may not even be stabilizing or controlling the motion of the foot to the degree that either we believe or that's being marketed to us. However, the point I would make is if you like these types of shoes, if you have good success in them, you do find them to be comfortable, and they are usually generally long wearing because of their firmness and their beefed up features. By all means, use a stability shoe, but for some of your running, if you can use more neutral and even more minimal shoes to a degree, that may be beneficial in the long term for foot health and lower extremity function. Just saying. Now, just a few other things to go over, and I think we'll wrap up this year's shoe update, running shoe update. I'm just having fun going through all the shoes that are on the table here. It's amazing the fashion statements that can be made with running shoes. And the thing I'd like to talk about last is the super shoes. And so these are those newer performance-oriented shoes that have the high stack height, and they have the special midsoles with elastomeric polymers or foams, which are designed to provide a bit more energy return, as well as the incorporation or the encapsulation of carbon fiber and in some brands now flex plate. So those started out as the Nike shoes, the Alpha Fly and the Vaporfly. However, now every brand practically is making a shoe like that. This being an Olympic year, the research and development is going wild, as is the marketing. I've seen a number of records fall, and to small extents, some of this may be attributable to the shoes across almost all distances, except for perhaps the shortest of sprints. My suggestion, if you're into performance and you think you might want to try to get 1% or 2 or 3, by all means, give them a try. They are expensive, but it's great that we have all this technology available to us at this time. So that's mostly what I wanted to say this season for the running shoe update, and I hope you've enjoyed this and can use it as a resource. Thank you so much for being with me today and for being a part of this community. I really appreciate you. And stay tuned for more episodes in both the Running Performance series and other great topics in health and human performance. Until next time, this is Coach Jay-Z signing out for the Lifetime Athlete.